Nikolai Dzhumagaliev, nicknamed Iron Fong, was born on November 15, 1952, in the village of Uzunagach, Kazakh SSR. His mother was a native of Belarus and his father was a Kazakh. He had 3 sisters, and the Dzhumagalievs did not have much wealth in his family. But, according to legend, the head of the family was a descendant of Genghis Khan himself, and little Nikolai was very proud of this fact. He grew up as an ordinary child. He got straight A's and B's at school. Dzhumagaliev was not particularly aggressive, but he treated girls with contempt, considering them second-rate people. And those girls literally hovered around Nikolai, fascinated by his unusual appearance. This is the Defunct City channel. Subscribe to our channel and don't forget to click on the bell, so as not to miss new episodes and stay up to date. Dzhumagaliev had his first sexual experience at the age of 18 and quickly lost count of his mistresses. However, along with promiscuity came problems. The young man caught syphilis and trichomoniasis, due to which he became averse to sexual intercourse. After graduating from the railway school in Almaty in 1970, Dzhumagaliev managed to work in Guriev and then joined the army. He joined the Chemical Defense Forces in Samarkand. After his demobilization, Dzhumagaliev returned home, worked as an electrician for 3 months, and then seriously considered changing his profession. He decided to become a driver and enroll at Kazan University in the Geological Exploration Department. But his plans were doomed to fail. Dzhumagaliev failed the entrance exams and was unable to learn to drive. Then Nikolai decided to travel and headed north. As a result, he traveled across the country from Murmansk to Magadan, changing classes all the time. Dzhumagaliev managed to be on an expedition, was a sailor and an electrician. It was at this time that he unexpectedly met a girl for whom he developed serious feelings. But she did not reciprocate, which was a real blow to Nikolai, spoiled by female attention. He hated the female species more and more. Dzhumagaliev's nomadic life ended in 1997, when he returned to Uzunagach. Deciding once again to change his profession, 25-year-old Nikolai got a job at the local fire station. For 2 years he led a quiet life. He worked and changed girls, and then he realized that he had to kill a man. On a day in January of 1997 he found a girl walking alone as an adherent of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The young man caught up with the victim, stabbed her in the chest and dragged her into the bushes. Having thrown the girl to the ground, Dzhumagaliev slashed her throat with the blade and began to drink her blood. This maniac's passion for the occult prompted him to do this. He had read in one of the books that the soul can be seen leaving the body through a cut in the throat. In addition, Dzhumagaliev learned from books that by drinking the victim's blood a person supposedly acquires the abilities of a seer. However, after killing the girl, he never saw her soul, and gained no superpowers, but became an ordinary murderer. When the victim stopped showing signs of life, Dzhumagaliev began dismembering the body, planning to consume human flesh for food in the future. He ate the flesh of his first victim for about a month. He boiled, fried, and salted it, as well as cooked cutlets and dumplings. Dzhumagaliev also used the remains for pagan rituals. What little was left of the victim was found by random passers-by on January 25 in Unveil near the settlement of Fabrikny. The body was so disfigured that the operatives did not immediately understand whether it was a man or a woman. Despite the active actions of the detectives, the girl's fiancé was suspected in the murder, as well as her co-religionists. They failed to find the murderer on footsteps. And in April of the same 1979 years, the police were waiting for a new terrible discovery of the remains of an elderly local resident who disappeared on the way home from church. The pensioner was the maniac's second victim, and once again the police were powerless in their search for Dzhumagaliev. And the maniac, feeling his impunity, committed a new, even more horrible crime. The maniac got into an apartment house and slit the throats of an elderly mother and her daughter who were sleeping there. He dismembered the victims and carried bags with their remains out of the house under cover of night. By some miracle, only a little girl survived. She was the granddaughter of one of the victims and the daughter of the other. She managed to hide in a closet, and Dzhumagaliev simply did not see her. The girl, despite her state of shock, told operatives about the nightmare she had seen, but she could not describe the killer's appearance. Not even a week has passed since the double murder, when the maniac went on a new crime, this time for revenge. One of his mistresses approached Dzhumagaliev and told him that she had reported her friend to the police, saying that she had stolen her personal belongings. Then the maniac ordered his girlfriend to bring the offender to his home, which she did shortly thereafter. Dzhumagaliev did not talk to his guest for long. She quickly agreed to have sex with him, during which the maniac strangled the girl, cut her throat, and began to drink blood. After that, Dzhumagaliev dismembered the victim, put the remains in a barrel, and salted them. But even this time the police failed to catch the murderer. True, 2 months later Dzhumagaliev did end up behind bars, but for an entirely different reason. In August 1979 the maniac shot and killed a fellow firefighter while drinking. According to some sources, the two had a quarrel. According to others, Dzhumagaliev simply decided to show off his gun among his drinking buddies and accidentally pulled the trigger. During the investigation, the accused underwent psychiatric examination. It was found out that he suffers from schizophrenia. Thus, the maniac avoided jail time and ended up in a mental hospital for 4.5 years for compulsory treatment. However, in reality Dzhumagaliev only stayed within the walls of the medical facility for a year, at the end of which the doctors considered the patient to be practically healthy and let him go. As soon as the maniac was freed, he immediately went back to his old ways. 3 more women died at his hands. One of them was a young mother who had just given birth to a child. The baby sleeping next to the victim did not embarrass the maniac at all. He inflicted 18 stab wounds on the woman, from which she died. Dzhumagaliev tried to detain the mother-in-law of the murdered woman, but he stabbed her and fled. The next, 9th victim might have been the maniac's last. One day in December 1918 there was a noisy group of boys and girls having a party at Dzhumagaliev's house, and alcohol was flowing heavily. At some point the guests noticed that the owner of the house and one of the girls had disappeared. The tipsy guests decided that the couple had gone into the bedroom for sex and burst in as a joke. The picture they saw shocked everyone. The bloodied body of the girl was lying on the floor, with the naked Dzhumagaliev leaning over it. He had cut off the victim's head and was pouring her blood into a basin. The guests rushed with wild screams to the nearest police station, but the maniac quietly continued to dismember the victim. However, there is another version. Allegedly Dzhumagaliev took the head of the guest himself. It belonged to the girl with whom the maniac had met on the famous Ahmadi Medeo skating rink some time before. Naked and bloody Dzhumagaliev met the arriving policeman right on the doorstep of the house. The policemen were taken aback, and the maniac took advantage of the delay and ran away. Later, when the policemen examined the house, they found the very barrel in which the maniac put the flesh of his victims to salt. Dzhumagaliev did not hide for long. A couple of days later they found him in the house of an acquaintance. She hid the maniac in the cellar, but attentive operatives noticed that new nails were hammered into the old floorboards. When they lifted the floorboards they saw the maniac lying there. Dzhumagaliev, who was nicknamed Iron Fong for his metal crowns and Saiyan, did not deny his guilt and immediately confessed to 7 of the 9 murders. By the way, by that time one of the detainees' sisters had disappeared without a trace, but he denied all possible involvement in the girl's disappearance. During interrogations Dzhumagaliev willingly shared with investigators his reasoning about the reasons for his murders. "I took the side of animals and only did to people what they do to animals," he said. According to the maniac, he killed girls in order to know their whole bodies, including through eating their remains. In addition, Dzhumagaliev admitted that he was taking revenge on the opposite sex for their promiscuous lifestyle and for the fact that girls put themselves on the same level as men, violating the laws of nature. As it turned out, Iron Fong, following the principles of mysticism, committed all murders on memorable dates, such as the anniversary of his grandmother's death or on his grandfather's centennial. In this way, the murders became similar to sacrifices. The maniac told the doctors about his dreams in which he saw a turbid river current or air currents carrying female body parts, legs, arms and heads. Dzhumagaliev's repeated psychiatric examination, which was conducted by specialists from the Serbsky Institute, only confirmed his schizophrenia. Therefore, instead of going to prison, the maniac was again sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. Dzhumagaliev spent long 8 years in a special hospital for especially dangerous people. According to some sources, during this time Iron Fong tried to end his life twice. But on the whole, the patient was very courteous to the staff, never rude, and complied with all doctors' orders. Therefore, in the year 1989 the doctors decided that Dzhumagaliev was no longer dangerous to society and he could be transferred to an ordinary psychiatric hospital. On August 29, the maniac was transported to the new place, with only an orderly and a nurse accompanying him. Dzhumagaliev took advantage of this circumstance and escaped when the trio arrived at Mana's Bishkek airport. The maniac's path lay in the Alado Mountains, where he wanted to get lost. But the police figured out Dzhumagaliev's plans. The men were looking for him using hang gliders. The operatives combed the mountain slopes, and after a while the military joined the operation. Meanwhile, the chief of the local military unit was at first reluctant to send soldiers to search for the maniac. Then the leadership of the Criminal Investigation Department reminded the military officer that his officers had wives who, like local residents, were in danger while Dzhumagaliev was at large. On the same day, the soldiers moved out into the mountains, and Iron Fong himself decided to let his pursuers follow a false trail. He asked his acquaintance to go to Moscow and send from there to Bishkek a letter written by Dzhumagaliev. He wrote that he was in the capital and was going to kill there. Iron Fang's plan worked. The employees of the post office noticed the strange letter without stamps. They couldn't return it to sender. The only items on the from whom list were the surname and first name Nikolai Dzhumagaliev. The postman gave the envelope to the police, and the policemen, having decided that the maniac was really in Moscow, stopped looking for him in the mountains and turned their attention to the capital. At that time Iron Fong himself was wandering in the mountains of the Alado. He lived in huts and caves and hunted animals. The maniac gathered medicinal herbs and mimeo, and then exchanged them with the local population for food and matches. Sometimes Dzhumagaliev went to nearby towns and according to some reports committed new crimes. Thus, in 2014 the maniac was accused of the massacre of student which took place in October 1929. He noticed his victim when he walked by the girl's house. He later broke in through the window. Iron Fong cut his victim's throat, drank her blood, and then cut off her head. When the killer left the house, a neighbor noticed him. The young man noticed that Dzhumagaliev's mouth was covered in blood and decided to ask what was wrong. But as soon as he took a step in the stranger's direction, he shouted that he was going to shoot and ran away. It is true that Iron Fong eventually became bored with a life of hardship and hatched a plan. In April of 1991, Dzhumagaliev stole a sheep from a flock that was grazing near Fergana, and did so in an emphatically ludicrous manner, so that he could get into the hands of the police as quickly as possible. The maniac, brought to the police station, immediately disguised himself as a Chinese who had escaped from China in search of a better life. Dzhumagaliev hoped that he would serve a short time and be released with a new name and a new passport. But the police were alerted by the fact that the detainee could not explain clearly where and how he crossed the border. And soon the investigator in charge of the search for Iron Fong arrived at the station where the detainee was held. Dzhumagaliev was quickly identified and returned for treatment. The maniac is still in a specialized psychiatric hospital in the settlement of Actus Almaty region. At one point, Dzhumagaliev even tried to file a petition for the death penalty, but it was expectedly rejected. In the hospital cells, the maniac became addicted to playing chess and repairing equipment. He behaves himself and helps the staff. It is said that some of the doctors believe that Dzhumagaliev is safe and can be released with subsequent observation by a psychiatrist. But this is categorically opposed by those who have first-hand knowledge of the terrible crimes of Iron Fong. Yevgeny Samovichev, an expert on serial crimes at the Main Criminal Investigation Directorate GUR, summarized his communication with Dzhumagaliev as follows. He is a wild beast embodied in the guise of a man. The basic structure is male dominance, the law of nature. He will never understand and put up with human life. Take care of yourself and your kin.